Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and with me tonight is my co-host,
Mushu, the one and only, the legend.
Yeah, thank goodness it was one and only.
The walking miracle,
yeah, exactly.
I like to say.
Oof, it's a miracle that he's...
The miracle I'm walking.
To wear a helmet, as goofy as he is. So, anyway, we're here tonight. We're going to do a show, and it's about not deer. And if you don't know what that is, you will by the end of the show. But before we get into all that, let me get into the information that we have to give you. PRTpodcast.com, that's the website, and we have a Patreon.
Patreon/PRT podcast.
Patreon is what he just said. Okay, so he's jumping out ahead of me here, and we have many Facebook groups, and I will get into those right now. I am an admin. Course, in my own group, I am the admin of Paranormal Roundtable. Then we have Paranormal Prayer Group, which is Nellie's, Paranormal Lounge, which is Nellie's, and then we have Dogman Werewolf Discussion, which is Phil Stern, Paranormal Encounters, which is
my group, which I have to admit that I'm not as active as I should be in.
Okay, and yeah, that pretty much it sucks. And then Wolf Turner of PRT fan page, I didn't make that. That was some guys that are friends of the show that made that, and they do all kinds of memes and funny stuff on there. And then Quad Coalition of Sciences, which is Nick Valente. North American Dogman Project Region 2, which is D.A. Roberts, great author, by the way. Paranormal Trucker Podcast, which is John King, and A Whisper to a Scream, which is Ryan Tremblay, and we do work with him too as well. And we're friends with a lot of these people and so on and so forth. So we do a Tuesday live stream, and you get about 3 hours of content extra a week for that live stream. So if you're only listening to us on the podcast, say on like Spotify or Podbean or whatever it is,
you're missing a lot of the behind, some extra stuff or interactions that you could be having. That
absolutely.
You won't get from the podcast. Some questions that you might have can be answered on the live stream. Mm-hmm. So just come by.
Yeah, and if you can't make it for the live stream, you miss the live stream, you don't get to be in the live chat. Well, don't despair. It's in the archives on YouTube.
You can always check it out. All of our live streams.
All of them are there for your viewing pleasure. And but to join in is really cool because you get to basically interact with me and
not only questions. You but also the paratroopers.
Yeah, you get to be with all the other paratroopers, the other cult members, as apparently somebody's taken to calling us. So whatever, dude. Whatever makes your choo-choo run, sir. So we have the website. We have the email address, which is joshturner@prtpodcast.com. joshturner@prtpodcast.com. And you can send me your stories there, or you can join me on Instagram, JoshTurner940, JoshTurner940. And I'm on Facebook, and I get a lot of stories through Facebook Messenger. You can send me through Facebook Messenger. If you're not a friend of mine on Facebook, send me a friend request. And 90% chance I'll approve it as long as you're a listener. And until you act up or something, you'll be my friend. And then like I said, we have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/PRT podcast. And if you're a $20 tier member, you will get a swag bag and an autographed book. And all you got to do is just commit. And even if you don't want to do it for but just a month, you'll still get that because, you guys are wearing our stuff and it helps promote the show and it helps support the show.
We like the way it looks, so we want to make sure you guys are dressed nice.
We cut down on commercials too, folks, because we want our listeners to not have to sit there and suffer through a bunch of commercials. I think that's one of the hardest parts about just having to. It's like it's a catch-22. That's how we make revenue, but also we don't want to run you off that you don't want to listen because you have to sit through commercials.
Yeah, and
so
also,
we kind of depend on the Patreon and donations.
It also breaks up the flow of some stories. I feel like because I know normally when I'm listening to something that's and you just boom commercial, it just makes me get out of it entirely.
Yeah, you fall out of it. So we try to limit the commercials, but in return. We do need the Patreon to support the show because all the money we make on the show right now kind of just goes right back into it. So that's kind of what we're doing. But eventually, hopefully, we will be able to have enough subscribers and enough listeners and enough whatever. But anyway, we're going to get into these stories tonight. And do you, Tony, know what not deer are?
When I looked it up, I thought it was KNOT, like actual knots, like, when you tie a knot. So I was thinking maybe it was deers with like these really misshapen, malformed appearances, which I'm half right.
They can be.
But I didn't know that it literally means not deer. Like deer, but kinda. And which I always found, I thought was really cool, and it made me interested. I always found these names to be, interesting how they make it up.
Or as I like to call them, Beyond Deer.
Beyond Deer sounds a lot better than Not Deer. I agree with that name a lot better.
So let's get into the stories of these Beyond Deer.
Yeah. I mean, the little articles I read about them are, they are intriguing. It makes me think of a couple things that I'm going to bring up later on when we start getting into it. But yeah, I'm definitely ready to hear about it and to hear more about them.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll begin our journey in Arkansas. This happened near Texarkana on the Arkansas side. Of course, Texarkana is Texas and Arkansas. That's what it's called, Texarkana. Texarkana is famous for the town having had a killer that killed some people back in the 60s and was never caught. And they made a movie about it called The Town That Dreaded Sundown. But anyway, these guys were out near Texarkana, and they were literally just coming back from hunting. And they had gotten back into town, and they lived on the edge of this very rural community, whatever, on the Arkansas side near Texarkana. And what ended up happening, they came back not sure what they saw. The funny thing is, neither one of them really talked about it. It's funny because the one guy's name was Ken. He let me use his name. And anyway, Ken and his friend, they didn't really talk about it. It was like they saw it, and then on the way home, they just played music and just pretended like it didn't happen. Yeah. But then when they got home, Ken's friend told his wife, me and Ken had a weird thing happen, and he said, but I don't think Ken noticed it. So the wives got to talking, and his friend told the other wife, and she goes, oh my gosh. So she goes and asks her husband, who's Ken, asked him, what happened?
Yeah.
And he's like, what do you mean what happened? She's like, well, and I don't know the other guy's name, but she said, his wife told me, at lunch that you and him had a weird experience. And he goes, oh, you mean the deer? And she was like, yeah. And he goes, wow, I didn't know if he noticed it or not, and she's like, what do you mean he didn't? He's like, he didn't say anything. So I thought my mind was like playing tricks on me. Like I thought I was just seeing things, and I thought, well, I don't want to say anything to this guy because he's going to think I'm crazy, And, they had been friends for a long time, and she's like, well, you guys should have been able to talk about this. I mean, y'all been friends for so long. But guys will do stuff like that.
And just internalize it and be like, well,
it must be just something I'm seeing or whatever.
Yeah.
And then she's like, well, were y'all drinking? And she was afraid at that time that he didn't want to admit it because she didn't like him to go out hunting and be drinking.
Yeah.
Right. And he was like, no, we weren't drinking. We were not. He goes, I promise we weren't drunk at all. He said, we didn't have a drink until we got back into the house or whatever. And then he went back to his place, and they didn't live but a few miles from each other. Like I said, it was very rural where they lived. The closest town, the big town, was Texarkana. And so he said, he's like, I'll tell you what happened. It was just weird. We were up in a tree stand, and we see these two deer come out into the clearing, and both of them had little short, stubby horns. So they looked like really young bucks. And so neither one of us really wanted to take a shot at them because you're not going to get much, they're these little small bucks, let them have some time to grow. He said, well, as they got closer to the tree, he's like, he was kind of on the way the tree stand was, it was like he was on one side of it and his friend was on the other. So they weren't really facing each other or next to each other. Like it was like two platforms, And he said that I saw, and we'll just give his friend a name, Ron, I guess, Ron and Ken. So Ken said, I didn't know if Ron had seen it or not because one of them walked around to his side and the other one walked around to my side. The one that looked up at me, the eyes were like really close together, and it was just staring up at me. And I thought, what the heck am I looking at? What is this thing? That's not a deer. And he said that it kind of opened its mouth and snapped its mouth closed real quick. And he thought he saw like pointed teeth, but he was like, am I seeing this? He said, and then it kind of looked down at the ground and moved its head up and down a couple times. And the other one came around to where he was at. And at that point, they were both staring up at him. And he said the other one looked just identical to the first one. And he said he heard Ron go, what the, heck, And he said, Ron, you okay? And he's like, yeah, are you? He goes, yeah, I'm fine. But nobody said anything about the weird looking animals. He said when they started walking off, he noticed not both of them, but one of them in particular had what looked like instead of hooves were like paws with little fingers coming off of it. Oof. And he was like the front, limbs.
Yeah. Oh, so the back were hooves, but the front.
Yeah, the front were not. And he goes, what? And the other one kind of ran off into the woods before the other one, And the one with the finger looking that he saw was a little bit bigger than the other one. That's the only difference. And he thought, what in the heck is that? Why is this one look, like it has pawed fingers, whatever. And he said that they didn't stand up on hind legs or anything like that. And it just ran off into the woods. And he told her, and she was like, what was that? He goes, I don't know. Nothing was correct on these deer. They just looked totally weird. And so then, they all went to dinner. They went to some catfish place, whatever. And he said that they were eating dinner and the wives were like, y'all didn't even say anything to each other? And he goes, no, because I didn't know he saw it. And he's like, I didn't know you saw it. I just thought, and he goes, well, I heard you say, what the heck, but, so yeah, that was a weird story. And so they ended up, it's just but that's just the introduction, folks. It gets weird, man. It gets really weird. Now there's another one I have near Comanche, Texas, and this one's real short. It's not real long. And this was given to me by a friend of mine's cousin. And he was driving down the road near Comanche, Texas, and this thing, another reason I say it's a thing, came hopping. At first he thought that's a deer on its hind legs, and then he thought it's a kangaroo. Then he thought, no, it's a deer on its hind legs. He said he was by himself and he was driving in his truck, and it was about 3 a.m, and this thing came jumping out from a really steep ditch and jumped out right in front of his vehicle. And it like hopped across the road onto the other side. And he goes, it was a deer. But he said that the front limbs did not look like, he said almost like the front where the hooves should have been, looked almost like rabbit paws. And he thought, what in the heck is that? Like, so it just hops across the road. And he's sitting there staring at it. And he's just in disbelief. And he's just like, dude. And I just drove right past it. And I looked. And I saw the tail, and he goes, and it wasn't a kangaroo. It wasn't like an escaped, animal.
Where was this at?
Near Comanche.
Okay, so
Comanche, Texas.
Okay,
you can look it up on a map. I think it's in northern.
I was just making sure it was Texas because I know Texas does have kangaroo listed as cattle, so it's common to see them. It might be common to see one around, but
I've never seen one in Texas.
I've never seen one either, but I do know that they are like listed as cattle, so that if it could be possible to see a kangaroo.
Yeah, he said this definitely was not because it had antlers.
That's what I was going to say, yeah. But and also kangaroos have very definitive, paws, our feet. And it's very noticeable. It's one of the main things that you can see when you see a kangaroo is they're either that or their tail. So it's not hard to distinguish what a kangaroo looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was very adamant that it wasn't a kangaroo.
Well, it has antlers. So, I mean, I would understand that.
He just thought it was weird that it was jumping. It was hopping.
Yeah.
So that, that part made it a little... yeah, and it was my friend Brian. I think you know Brian.
Yeah.
It was his cousin that told me that story. So it was weird. Like he told me that story, and I thought, what the heck was that? And he's like, dude, I wasn't gonna, stop because it was so weird, And he said the eye that he saw was just the left side of the body, and it looked like the eye would kind of shine just like a normal deer would shine, But that was a weird story. And so I had that one. And so here's another one. Okay, now this one was given to me. This one supposedly happened on a reservation down in South Texas. And I don't know if this is true. This is a secondhand story, folks. Take it for the grain of salt. I don't know if this is real. But I was told this happened. It was on the reservation, which I think it was either, the story was told, it was either Kickapoo or Lipan. But anyway, this happened years ago, back in the 60s. Now, like I said, this was a story that was given to me by a friend of ours. And I don't know. Anyway, he lived down there in that area, and his uncle he was a constable. And he went with some tribal police to serve a warrant. Now, he claimed that his uncle told him that somebody ran out the back of a trailer. Okay. And when he scaled the fence, he ran around and he looked underneath the trailer because it was up on like blocks. He could see the guy's legs going up the fence. So he ran around the other side of the trailer to go, and this guy jumped and landed in tall grass and began to crawl into the tall grass. Then about halfway, a deer stands up and then bounds off into the brush. I don't know. Now, I got a similar story to that.
Well, I was going to say that's interesting because, well, maybe I'll let you finish the second story before I bring this point up. Because this is actually what at the very beginning, how I mentioned I had a couple things that I thought it might be. Mm-hmm. And this is pretty close to what I thought it might be. So I'm going to hear the second story before I put any thoughts down.
Well, this one happened in Colorado, and I don't know that this one was on a reservation. This one was, I read this one somewhere. But anyway, this one wasn't given to me. Like I said, I think I read it like somewhere. It might have even been on Reddit. I'm trying to remember where I read it. But anyway, this story reminded me, and it was a story that was told. Somebody had told this story, and I can't remember if it was somebody's channel or it was in the comment section. Forgive me, folks. I'm trying to remember. It's not mine. But it happened in Colorado, and it may have been on an Indian reservation. I'm not real sure. But what happened was these officers had showed up to serve a warrant to a guy. Very similar thing. The guy ran off and fell into some tall grass, and it looked like a deer
popped up where he was.
It was like where he was running to get away. One of the guys said that it looked like a wolf low crawling. One of the other constables claimed that they saw a man. And now, then the other ones were kind of undecided. They weren't sure. But what was a wolf low crawling in the grass, they couldn't tell if it was a man, a wolf, or both, and there was this mass confusion. Then they see this deer pop up, just similar story, and then it ran into the brush. Same thing. And the suspect was a Native American. And supposedly he was into black magic. They found all kinds of weird stuff in his house. Now, here's another one. I got a story like that out of Mexico. And this happened just south of Monterrey. And it was a very similar story to this one. And I was told this one by my friend's grandmother like years ago, that these guys had come to this guy's house because he had assaulted a bartender that was a local bartender or whatever, and he was dying. And this guy's family had paid the police off. Now, this happened supposedly way back 30, 40 years ago. And when they went to go catch this guy ran, and supposedly he crawled up under a fence, and right when he got on the other side of the fence, all they saw was like a coyote. And the coyote like took off into the brush, and the guy was never seen again.
I was going to say Skinwalker.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's what I thought when I first started reading about this was Skinwalker. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that you hear about is the lack of fear of humans, mm-hmm. which they try to, I guess deer have like a mad cow disease, like that type that's mm-hmm. similar, that has the symptom of the lack of fear of humans. But the way this seems is like the stories that I've read seems more like awareness of humans, of like they understand what a human is more instead of being like just out of their mind crazy. Mm-hmm. So like that's what makes me think like, oh, Skinwalker, because why would you fear what you know?
Yeah. So
then, especially in the first story, when the deers look up at them, they know where they're at. They understand that these are hunters. That's why they have short horns, because they know they're not going to shoot me because I'm not. They know that hunters don't shoot until deers grow up more,
or they shoot them and it's not going to do bucks. Anything to them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, like even just to prevent bullets from even coming near me is like, oh, I'll look like a young deer, so I don't have to worry about bullets, hunters shooting me on accident if they see me. So yeah, that's what like when I heard that first story, the first thing I thought like it's starting to sound a bit like a Skinwalker.
Mm-hmm. Well, the next one is definitely what I think would be a Skinwalker, because this one happened right outside the Navajo reservation. And so these people were driving, and they were going down the highway. And this guy, I know him actually pretty well. He's a member of the group or whatever, but I don't have permission to say his name. But anyway, we'll call him Alvin. But anyway, Alvin and his wife and his 2 kids were driving, and they were in an SUV, and they were driving right outside of the Navajo reservation, and they encounter this thing in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night that just comes out of the desert and just starts running alongside their vehicle, and it looks like a deer. And for all intents and purposes, it was a deer. And it was running alongside the passenger side, and then he realizes, dude, this thing, I'm going 65 miles an hour.
And this thing is catching up.
This thing is catching up. It just looked like a deer.
Yeah.
And he's like, how can this deer be running 65 miles per hour? So he goes, I sped up to 75. And it just kept going. And he goes, this is unreal. Then he goes, all of a sudden it just stopped. And I thought, oh, okay. And it just kind of veered off, and that was it. He said about 2 or 3 miles down the road, it comes back out of the darkness. He's pretty sure it was the same creature. And it was on the driver's side. Ran right up alongside him, and he said when it got close to him, he looked at its face and its mouth, and he said that some of the flesh looked like it was falling off of it. And like you could see the mouth, like right around the mouth in particular, and it had these like canine-looking teeth, like how dogs' teeth look. They're all sharp, you know? He said that's how this thing's mouth looked. And he goes, this is not a deer. I don't know what this thing is, but it was running alongside him. And then at the last second, it just stood up on its hind legs and stopped. And then he just kept going.
Like instantly?
It just stopped instantaneously and just stood up on its hind legs. And he watched it in his rearview mirror, just standing in the middle of the highway. And he was like, what in the heck did I just see? Like, what was that? I mean, like, and so, he told me, and then when we started talking about it, and I said, well, he goes, have you ever heard of anything like that? And I said, yeah, I have actually. I've heard of a lot of weird stories, like people driving along, especially near the reservations, and them, running into these. This happened in New Mexico, but there was one near the Mescalero Reservation in Ruidoso. Mm-hmm. And these people were driving along. They were going past Ruidoso, and they had this weird, what they thought, first it looked like a white, and I thought maybe like a crawler type thing or whatever, but it was like a white-looking creature that was low to the ground and kind of crawled up next to their vehicle, next to their minivan, and then it just kind of morphed, like quickly popped up and became like a deer. But the feet still looked weird, like it had phalange, like a finger. Yeah. And they were looking at it, and they were like, what the heck are we looking at? And it was like a white-looking deer, and then it just veered off. And now here's what's weird. Right around that same area, I got a story right before you get into Ruidoso, near the end of the mountain gods in that area. These people watched this deer go across the road, and this is in New Mexico too. And they call it the land of enchantment. So, and it like jumped in front of their vehicle and then hopped again and then was on its hind legs. And then it turned and just stared at them as they drove by on its hind legs. Now, it didn't have any weird features like human looking features. It just had the hooves, the bottom feet, the hooves on both sides. And then it just they drove right past it, and they just stared right at it. And it just looked like a normal deer.
I'm curious about how the feet would work. Like, does it look more like how a satyr's feet looking? I mean, like, is it like thicker like that? Deer. Well, I just mean like how the standing, how it would look. Like, does it, because how dogmen have to basically, you hear that cracking noise or that breaking or that popping noise when they change from 2 to 4. Because like they're basically realigning their joints or whatever, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how like a deer would have to do that, because that's not something I would expect to ever stand on 2 legs, because we have toes to help us, and a deer, just the hooves. I wouldn't think like they have enough stability to keep themselves upright like that. I'm just, tired of things starting to stand up on 2 legs. Just stay on the 4.
Exactly. So here's another one. This one happened near Waxahachie. Now Waxahachie is about 120 some odd miles from Comanche, so it's not that far. They're both in North Texas. One is a little further west. I think Comanche's in northwest, and the other one's northeast, a little further east, whatever. And this guy was riding a motorcycle. He said it was about midnight, and Waxahachie is like, if from here you know where it's at. It's like up near Dallas, Fort Worth area. Mm-hmm. It's not far from there anyway. Okay. And so he was coming back from Dallas, I think he said, and he was coming through Waxahachie, and he had stopped at some place or whatever, and then right outside of there, he got down on this and it was on the middle of the highway. It wasn't like some desolate road. I think it was I-35. And he said that for some reason there wasn't any cars on either side right there where he was at. And midnight, 1 o'clock, there's still a lot of traffic on I-35, dude. And so anyway, it's a major artery, major thoroughfare in the United States. So he's driving down the highway, and in the middle of the road, he sees a deer laying in the road, and he slows down and goes, "Oh, the deer's been hit. I better, get in the other lane and get away from it." Because he said it was in the middle between the two lanes, and so he goes, "I better get out of the way." So he kind of pulled, just veered around to go. He slowed down a little bit, and he said right before he got up to it, this thing hopped up really quickly. And he goes, dude, it was like up on all fours, like immediately. He goes, and then when I turned, I looked at it, it just like literally opened its mouth like it was yawning or something. He goes, and I saw like rows of teeth, like sharp teeth. And he goes, and as I drove by it, dude, I looked over at it and its eyes were glowing yellow. He goes, and it was just like looking at me, and it was kind of like it was quivering, like it was vibrating or something. And I thought, what the heck am I looking at? So he goes, I just punched it and I was gone. He goes, I was doing like 90, 100. And he goes, and I looked back and this thing didn't move. It just stayed there right in the middle of the highway. And then he's like, in the distance, I could see lights coming from behind me, and then lights on the other side. But he goes, but for that moment, there was no vehicles, nothing. And it was just this weird looking deer. And he said the deer looked pregnant, like it was big and fat, like a doe.
Bloated, maybe?
Like it was bloated, yeah. And he thought, that it was either bloated or pregnant. And he thought, this is so weird. He goes, the way it hopped up and just stared at him. And he goes, and then when it opened its mouth and it had all these weird looking teeth and it had these yellow glowing eyes that were illuminated by nothing, it just, it's a quick encounter.
Yeah.
But it was still like,
it's another reason for me not to ever ride a motorcycle, but
if there's not enough already for me.
Do you think maybe they're like corpses of deer being taken over by something? That's why a lot of them are rotting. Like a dead deer, like a deer dies and something enters it and takes over that body.
Something animates it?
And animates it in turn, or maybe, that's part of the black magic is that they have to enter corpses of the animals to take over the body.
Yeah.
Because you hear like a lot of these are like rotting, and, a lot of these look like there's something wrong with them. And it could be, death. Death was what happened to them. Oh, and they're just alive again, so that's why it looks so unnatural.
Yeah, I mean that's very So that one there was that's an oddball story too. I mean, and and I got another one that's very similar along that vein, and this one happened near Alexandria, Louisiana, and this guy was right. Same thing happened to him, but he wasn't in a motorcycle, but he was driving in a small pickup. I think he was it was like a Ford Ranger or something. This was a recent sighting. This wasn't, this was only a couple of years ago. And he's a listener of the show, and he was driving, down the highway near Alexandria, Louisiana. And he said that he saw what looked like a deer on the side of the road. And as he got, it was just standing there. There was no, it was weird how it was kind of like partway on the road. And he said he moved over into the interior lane to keep from, and then all of a sudden it started to go toward his vehicle as he was passing it. And he looked, and it had these huge antlers, and he looked at it, and he said that same thing. He saw like these weird looking teeth, and the eyes were kind of close together. And he said he looked down and he saw what looked like it looked like a man literally crawling on his hands and knees, going toward him. And he said when he was approaching it, it just looked like a deer standing there with big old antlers. But then he said when he got, close,
as soon as he passed it,
it started to pass it. He looked over and he said it just looked like a really large man, like a large guy. Like, if this guy would have stood up, he'd have been 7-8 feet tall, crawling toward his vehicle. And he said it was just real fast. He drove by it. And I mean, he just looked over and it was there and then it was gone. So, yeah, I mean, that story was really bizarre. I was just like, man, what in the heck is that? Now I know that there was another story, and this one was, and I'm going to try and get this guy on the show. I've talked to him before about it, but he had been out hunting near Mathis and he saw these 3 deer like stand up on their hind legs. And now I got to go back and get more information from him, and I really want to get him on the show because this guy was like he worked in like, with people who'd had strokes, like that's what he did for a living or that's what he does, whatever. And I think he's got like a Cowboys podcast or something. Anyway, I'm going to get him on the show. And he lives out in their Corpus. Like that's where Mathis is, on the other side of Corpus. And, we've spent a lot of time
in Port Aransas and drive up to Corpus.
Yeah. And so anyway, this guy was out hunting out near Mathis and he saw these 3 deer and they stood up on their hind legs and started moving around like men. And his name's Mark. I'm going to get him on the show at some point, and he's interested, like he was interested in actually talking about it. A lot of these other people don't want to, because this, I mean, honestly, folks, I can see why, because this subject's so bizarre. It's like when you tell people that you saw a deer get up,
but
and
not like that's it. Yeah,
it's like it's weirder than saying you saw a werewolf.
Yeah, it's like I saw a deer, but kinda. Yeah, it's like it's hard to explain.
Beyond deer.
Beyond deer, I think is a great name.
But it's not. I mean, it's a freaky subject. But I couldn't believe when I went back and I started looking at how many stories I had of this thing. I thought, you know what? They're not real long encounters, but they are very profound. Like these people remember this.
Yeah, they stay with them.
Mm-hmm. And now here's another one that I can tell you. This one happened to a guard that used to work for us, and I think it was probably around the time when you first started. You probably remember him too. I'm going to say his name, but he's kind of dumb.
Oh, okay.
I think you know who I'm talking about. Yeah. And he used to work for a friend of ours too.
Yeah, I know exactly. I think I do.
And I think he ended up going to jail for a while after he worked for us. But anyway, he was kind of not real bright, but he was out near Cedar Park. Near Westlake, and he was dating some girl. For some reason, he always managed to get girlfriends, and you know what I'm talking about. It's crazy. But he had some girl that he was dating, and I guess it was dumber than him to actually go out with him. But anyway, anyways, folks. I
mean, it sounds like we're being mean, but we're honestly like being kind of nice.
Nice, because the guy was very irresponsible and kind of dumb. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that he's the kind of person he's wearing.
He'll shoot himself in the foot.
Yeah. Yeah,
anyway.
Well, actually, he ended up going to jail because he was doing something with a gun, and it was pretty stupid.
Anyway,
he was dating this girl, and he told me a weird story. He told me and D, my brother, and I think maybe Anthony too, but he told us this weird story. Like he was on his way to work after dropping off this girl out near Westlake, and these 2 deer, he said they looked like zombies. He said they just kind of slowly walked out in front of him, over their Redbud Lane. I think or is that Redbud Trail, whatever it is, out there near Westlake, going out toward a Hula Hut.
Oh, okay.
And that little road, right down that area. And he said where that little, like when you get to that little turn where that store is at right there, and it closes early. It's like a service station or something. And he said he was right there at that 4-way stop, and these 2 deer just go walking across the road. And when they look at him, he said one of them's face on the I think he said the left side of his face was rotted all the way down to the bone, and the flesh was falling off of it. And he said that the other one was walking across the road, and I get this, he said it had no eyes. And he was like, dude, how are these things alive? And he said that you could see like what looked like flies and stuff buzzing around them, And he said it was, it was nighttime. It was at dusk, whatever. But he goes, but there was nobody around. He goes, but I could clearly see that they looked like zombies, And he goes, he calls them zombie deer. He goes, they look like zombies. And he said that one of them's like right front leg I think he said the one that was the closest to him, one of its front legs, he didn't specify which leg or whatever, but he said that there was one that was closest to him, which would have been on the right side of the vehicle, on the passenger side. And he said that the leg was like, you could see the bone on the leg. And he was like, are these dead? Like, what is this? And he goes, they just turned and kind of faced him, and he just drove on. They weren't threatening or anything like that. And he thought, what a pitiful, thing if these are,
actually alive and experiencing
they're just dying. But yeah, he couldn't make out what the heck it was or why they were in that state. Like, why are these things, why do they look like that?
Why are they still alive? Yeah.
Yeah. Why are they not just dead? So not dead. And I'm not making light of it. It's just, it's
so weird.
It's horrific. It's a weird thing.
It makes me think back to what I said earlier about it could be that these are like dead deer.
Mm-hmm.
They're just coming back to life somehow through whatever means. But it's just like they seem they should be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes me think like how it could run 75 miles an hour. Well, if it's not an actual living creature and is using just the body of one, it could push it to as far as it wants to, not worrying about if it breaks down because it's already broken.
And it would, if the legends are to be believed, and these are some sort of shaman that can change into these things, then does the flesh all fall away and then they reconstitute, or how does that work?
Is that a time limit? Is like you only have until this body breaks down?
Because I had a guy who was from Africa. He was originally from Cameroon, and he told me a weird story. I used to work out with this guy, and he's a preacher now. But he was telling me that there were these shamans that had tried to curse them when they were building a church in the west side of the country. And he said that they were trying to build a church, and he said that one of them, literally before 20 members of his congregation, changed into a gazelle to prove the power that they had, and that they worshiped some kind of god named Okuda or some weird name. I forgot, what it was, but he told me, he's like, dude, this thing really happened. He goes, we had pictures of it, he didn't have them with him. This happened back when they had cameras and people were snapping photos of this, but they didn't, and he said, he's like, he left, the country or whatever because he was being threatened. And I think he's now a preacher here. I got to get back in touch with him, but I used to work out with him at 24 Hour Fitness. And you might have met him. He's a big guy. He was from Cameroon, but he was a preacher.
Oh, you know what? I think I actually know exactly who you're talking about. There's one guy from Cameroon that I remember speaking to that you mentioned.
Yeah, and he was telling me that one of these shaman changed into a gazelle. Subsequently, after he'd left or whatever, these guys that were hunters shot. This is the story, okay? I'm not saying this is true. This is what he had, and this is what was told to him. And like I said, I don't have permission to say his name. And he was on my old Facebook account. I don't know if he still is. But anyway, they shot a gazelle out in the bush. And when they ran around the bushes to get to it, it was a guy laying there dying. And so they just left him there. And they looked at him and they said, oh, this is the shaman. This is that guy. And they reported back that they had killed him on accident. I don't know. That's a weird thing.
Well, you know what? Running around looking like deer or gazelle, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I think it's an intermediate thing. Like, I think if you're going to be, okay, like the guy that get low crawled under the fence because he was a wolf, and then when he needed to escape and run fast, he became a deer.
Yeah.
Because it's a faster animal, so I can get away faster, whatever.
It's also more common, or harder to track.
Yeah. And then the guy that low crawled and then he climbed the fence and then got over the other side, he became a coyote. It's like if you had that ability, you're going to choose whatever animal is going to be the most convenient to get away. The deer would have been too tall in the grass, and the people might have shot him, from there. So as a coyote, he's lower and in the grass, and they can't get a good shot at him. But yeah, that's weird. And then there was another story. This one happened out of Cedar Park, not too far from where your mom's shop is at. And there was a guy who told me, but it happened like 20 years ago. And he said he was driving down 1431. And he said that this thing was running alongside the vehicle, or not like right on the highway or whatever. He was in the one lane and it was like on the side of the road. And he said he looks over and he goes, I've never seen a deer that looked like that. It was real stocky. Bulky, had almost like a cow looking head to it, and he said that it just didn't look, but it had the body like of a deer and the color of a deer, and it had the white tail. And he thought, what the heck? Why does that head look so bizarre, you know? And he said that when it turned and it kind of veered off, like he thought, okay, well, that's the end of it. Then all of a sudden it goes running out of the bush in front of his vehicle. And he actually manages to just narrowly avoid hitting it, but it reared up its back hind legs and kicked his driver's side window and busted it, you know, cracked it, whatever. And he was just like, what the heck? It's like this thing was on a mission to do that. And then he said, then it just stood there in the middle of the road as he's driving down the highway, you know, it just stood there, you know. So I don't know. I mean, you know, and that's a friend of mine's brother that told me that story. And I just, you know, and I don't know. It's just a weird thing, you know. I mean, I asked him, you know, a couple times about that story, and he goes, man, you know, he said, he admitted to me he had been drinking, like he was coming from a bar, you know, and he said, but he goes, I wasn't smashed. I'd had a couple beers after work. He's a welder. And, you know, he goes, I was doing a welding job there and I was driving home, you know, and it was just weird. It was like, but it was the weirdest looking deer. And he goes, if I didn't know any better, I think it was trying to make me wreck or hurt me.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, it seemed like it wanted it to hit him. And then it kind of did that and like, oh, you missed me? And I'm going to get whatever I can.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's so many of these weird accounts of these stories. And if you go to like different sites, like different, like I read a couple stories, you know, like from Reddit, which you know,
that's where I looked it up.
I'm not using their stories or anything like that. Because these are stories that I gathered myself. Well, not all, but one or two of them. But you know, you get all these weird reports, and then there's all these different channels that people are doing with these stories. Because Nelly had told me, hey, there was and I didn't even bother to listen to him, but there was one that had 3 or 4 stories on there, and I think that they ended up on the Paranormal Roundtable group. If you're not in the Paranormal Roundtable group, go join, because this show will be dropped. The link will be dropped to this show, just like all the shows, and it's dropped in the Paranormal Roundtable group, and then you can go and leave a comment, and if you get chosen, your comment gets chosen, and you win a free book.
Or you'll always win a free book, but you might even win something
get some
more.
Swag, depending on what we're offering at the time, yeah. And so anyway, that being said, go to the Paranormal Roundtable group, and you'll get all kinds of stories like this. People that write them out too, man. I mean, and so I get all kinds of stories, and every time I do a show about something, I get more stories.
Yep.
Yeah, and I talked about them. So what I started doing was talking about them on the live stream. And right after I talked about the not deer episode, well, I got 2 or 3 different little stories, you know, to add to this. And so I'll probably get more after this, because every time I do a show, I get a bunch of stories. But I got one that was I think probably one of the most bizarre, and this one was it's not real long, but this one and this one happened right outside of Alice, Texas. And this person was outside, they were visiting family, relatives, whatever, and they went to take out the trash. And they were, I guess they were having a get-together at his grandmother's. And they went to take out the trash, and he sees this glowing green ball of light. And he's like, dude, it's about the size of a basketball, and it's kind of bobbing in the field behind his grandmother's house, and it's very rural where he's at. And it starts going toward him. And he said, dude, I should have just ran in terror, but I just couldn't take my eyes away from it. I just was mesmerized. I had to stare at this thing, and I was like, what is this thing, and why am I staring at it? And he said that then once it got closer, it started to expand and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually he said, man, I need to get the hell away from this, whatever this is. And then he said when he went to turn to move, he couldn't. He's like, I was frozen and paralyzed. Like I was frozen in place. And he said that the thing began to, the color of the green began to fade and fade and fade until it was just like a pale, like kind of a faint light. And then bloop, out falls this deer. Right there on the ground. And he goes, dude, I'm sitting there staring at him going like, what in the heck am I looking at? He goes, and then it jumps up and it runs off into the darkness, making this weird noise. And he's like, I'm thinking, okay, that's, you know, what is this? And then he goes, and then I hear it like kind of like it flanked me, and it was on my right side, like going around me. But then I heard a weird noise on the other side of me. And I'm thinking whatever was on the other side sounded bipedal. He's like, and then I heard what I think was the deer on the other side of me. So he goes, I just took off. I finally was able to move. And I got over my fear and my panic or whatever. And he goes, and I was sweating and my heart felt like it was bounding out of my chest. And he says he finally turned around and he ran inside the house, and his grandmother's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" His name's Juan, but and she's like, "Are you okay, Juan? Are you okay?" And he's like, "I'm fine. And he didn't want to tell anybody. And he said that when he went into the back bedroom where his cousin was back there playing video games, and he started talking to him. His cousin's like, "Are you okay, dude? You look really pale. You look like something's wrong." He goes, "Dude, I just saw the weirdest thing." So then when he told his two cousins about what had just happened, he goes, "Oh, you mean those green balls of light?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, we see those all the time, dude. They're always moving around out there." And he goes, "No, but I saw something fall out of it." And they were like, "What? You did?" Like they had never seen anything come out of it. He goes, "When we see them, we just like go back inside. And they're always like toward the back of the property by the tree line." He goes, we just ignore them.
He was like, "Well, I'm the idiot who stayed."
Yeah, well, he didn't live there and he wasn't used to seeing them. Yeah. So he's like, "What the heck am I looking at? I'm going to stand here until this thing kills me."
Don't you think you should have warned someone about that, maybe?
I think I'm going to stand here until I get killed by it. But he said that by the time he made the decision to try to run, but he thought that there was more than one thing, because he said that he saw that deer, but he said that there was something bipedal to his left, which is interesting. I wonder what that was.
I was going to say, you know those fish that has those bobblehead things, and they have like, some of them have like a feather, or some of them have that light in the deep, and it's like to memorize, or it's like to, for fish to be entranced by it and ignore the bigger danger. That's kind of what it reminded me of, like that.
So, in your assessment, do you think that it was trying to...
Is that how they get born? Is that how they are made? Is it giant green balls? And he just happened to witness one being put onto this earth? Like, it's weird. Like, the fact that it immediately ran away and then came back to Flanka makes me... Did he get scared by the other creature first? That's why...
Yeah, what was that all about? Like,
yeah.
Well, I did ask this question, and I'm glad that you brought, because I was going to tell you, one of the things that this man that I talked to claims to have seen Bigfoot, or a Bigfoot. And he didn't live down in South Texas. That's not where he was from. He lived out in West Texas, near the Panhandle, and so he said that one time when he was driving around out near I can't remember the name of the town, Alpine. It was near Alpine, Texas. He said that he was driving in near Alpine, Texas, and he saw what looked like a giant black, furry thing just go across the road really quick as he was driving with his girlfriend. And I think he said that his girlfriend was going to school there at Saul Ross, the college, or not. In fact, I know what he said. And he said that we were driving by, and she's like, "Look at that, it's Bigfoot." And he's like, "What?" And he looks. And she got a better look at it. It wasn't like he was
focusing on driving.
He was focusing on driving, and she said it looked just like, and she said it had a big old butt. She said it's like a big old butt, And she said that she looked, and it was just, he saw the backside of it. He said it was probably about 8 feet tall. And so he asked me if I thought that would be any connection to what he saw down in Alice, Texas. I don't know.
It's possible that it at least shows that it might be in the same similar area that what he saw these things in, right?
No, it was pretty far from each other. Alpine's way out there.
I don't know if that really would have a connection.
Mm-hmm.
If it's pretty far away from each other. Like, I don't know if they're connected to him directly. Like, maybe Bigfoot is if that Bigfoot was the secondary creature, the bipedal one that came, what are they, like, protecting him for some reason?
Well, here's a weird connection. When you, Alexandria, okay, I've gotten a weird story out of Alexandria of a hyena-looking creature on the side of the road. And somewhere in Louisiana, I don't think it was Alexandria. I'm trying to remember exactly where. But my grandparents claim to have seen like a weird-looking, half wolf, half hyena-looking thing stand up on its hind legs.
I remember. And you said that your grandpa never really spoke about it.
Yeah, my grandmother did.
Yeah, your grandmother did, but your grandpa
My grandpa would talk about those ones down in Pinto Canyon, though, the little coyotes that would run around on two legs. I guess they didn't scare him.
Yeah.
He just said they looked like little coyote men or something. I was like, what? What is that? Like, you don't really have a problem with it. I do remember one time in particular, like going out near Lawrence Cemetery, and hearing there was a story of, now, that area, we've gotten reports out of the Black Panthers out of there. But near Lawrence Cemetery, I got a weird story of a black dog that haunts that place. And it's just a legend. To date, I don't have anybody who's actually given me an account of it. It's just a legend that supposedly there's a black dog that haunts that area. And sometimes it'll be seen with like a deer walking around. Like it'll be walking around the cemetery and people will see a deer like either next to it or around the area. And I thought, wow, that is bizarre. Why would this demonic black hellhound be seen walking around with a deer?
I was going to say, like, the only similar trait that I've noticed really is like the teeth, the sharp teeth, and like how it basically becomes like a feral version of a deer or like a more predator version, like the forward-facing eye or like closer together
forward-facing eyes, yeah.
Yeah, like it turns into a predator. So maybe, is it demonic, based? Are these like hell deer that we're seeing?
The weirdest story I ever got was when I was a child, and I heard this story when I was a kid, and it's something that I wanted to talk about, and I thought, it was just too silly to me, to even, contemplate as a child because I had not seen what I'd seen up to that point, But I remember hearing this story as a kid, so, years later, probably 7-8 years later, because I thought that Tommy had seen a dog man, but he said no, it wasn't a dog man. It was more of a Bigfoot type creature, and it was just like on the side of it was real quick. So, but he said no. He goes, other than that weird looking thing that I saw near, I think he said that where he saw that was near Caldwell, which is a place that we get a lot of weird stories out of. But he said that the only other weird thing that he had seen was near Prairie View when they had gone hunting. That when he was a kid, they shot a deer, and it was his first kill, a deer. It's like a rite of passage, And when they went in to cut it open, whatever, there was no blood. No blood. And I thought, this is the weirdest story. He said it was covered in ticks, and so they determined that the ticks had sucked it dry. But how the heck was it walking around?
How was it moving for you?
Yeah, to shoot. So I thought, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Even as a kid, I was like 8 or 9. I thought, that's not correct, Tommy. Like, like he had, and I was jealous because I didn't shoot my first doe until I was like 11. So, or maybe I was 10, I think. But anyway, he had already shot one, and I was like, oh man, he shot a deer. I want to shoot one, And so, of course, I didn't go with my dad because my dad didn't do anything, we went deer hunting and he went, and I just, sat there. And then I finally went with my friend, one of my friend Ronnie's dad, when we were kids. He took us out hunting or whatever, and I shot my first deer. And but it was so weird, like, when they said that this thing had no blood, and I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, how could it have been functioning? I mean, as a little child, I even knew that was stupid. Like,
well,
that doesn't make
I'm also
sense.
sure ticks are poisonous. So, like, that thing wouldn't have survived if it had that many ticks enough to drain its blood. It would have been dead long time ago. Mm-hmm. So,
like carry Lyme disease.
Yeah. So the fact that it was even moving, should let you know, like, there's something going on here. Like, if I came up to it and I saw nothing but ticks on a deer, I wouldn't want to cut it open.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard of moose doing that too, like just being completely, and that
drained?
brings, well, yeah, just like they're so full of ticks that it actually will kill them.
Yeah. That's what I understand. I've seen that too. Like, you just see giraffes. I've seen just them covered in ticks, and that's how they die, is because of it. Mm-hmm. So, like, that's what I would expect to happen to all animals. So, like, to see one walking around that completely drained of blood is bizarre to me completely. Because even the giraffe I saw, like, I think like someone shot it or something like that, and it was still bleeding from that, and it had been dead for a little bit. Mm-hmm. So if that thing with all the ticks on it could still bleed, I can't imagine how this deer was moving.
Yeah, how was it alive? How was it standing up?
Yeah,
what was animating it? That's the Franken deer. I don't know, man.
That's a good name for these things too, Franken deer, because they always seem to be, decayed somehow.
Yeah, and then this is another one I got. Now, this is a guard that told one of our former guards. He used to work for this company, and I don't even know the guy's name. This is just one of our guards. This guy Joe that used to work with us. He told me this story, and he said that this guy had gone. who was doing his patrol or whatever, had gone around the back of one of the buildings over there off that 360 corridor. And you know, that area, dude, those buildings, they're out in the middle of nowhere, dude. Yeah. I mean, it's surrounded by woods. I mean, there's other buildings and stuff, but it's really just a lot of woods out there. And so guards tell us weird stories that they see people, you know, weird eyes and Bigfoot, Dogman. We've gotten weird stories of different stuff. And this guard had gone around to the back to check, you know, because somebody had reported an injured animal. So he goes around to the back and he sees the head of like a deer going through the woods. And somebody had said that there was a deer that had been hit in the parking lot and it was laying there dying. So he goes to where this deer, quotations, was laying on the ground supposedly, and there was blood. And so he goes, he starts kind of scanning the back area of the parking lot. Where one of the employees had said, "Hey, you know, somebody like they had said that somebody had hit a deer, and it looks like it had been laying there or something." And so he goes to the back and he starts scanning with his flashlight, and he sees the head of a deer walking, and he thought, "Oh, there it is, right there. It must be wounded, but it got away."
Yeah.
But it also managed to scale an iron fence that wasn't extremely high, but you know, so it's not that hurt. And then he starts realizing that how tall that deer's head was like 7-8 feet up in the air. And he was like, "Oh, wait a minute, this isn't correct." And then and then when it came out between two trees, he had the light right on it. He said that he saw what should have been its hooves out in front of it, like hands. And then it was standing on its hind legs. And he goes, "Dude, it didn't take me 2 seconds to figure out that I didn't need to be there." So, you know, he told Joe that, and he told Joe, I was like, "I got the heck out of there. I just ran back to my truck and I got in and I took off." He goes, and Joe's like, you know, Joe's goofy. He's like, "You didn't stop to take pictures?" He goes, "Heck no, I didn't take no pictures. I just took off."
Hey, it sounds like a smart guard. Sounds like a guard that's trained to observe and report.
Even with me, as thirsty as I am for knowledge and to try to, you know, stuff out, you know, and stuff. And I don't think I could have even stood there and tried to take a picture. I probably would have just ran and got my vehicle and then maybe regretted it later, because I'm thinking in my mind, like, what would I have done? Because I probably would have done the same thing, because I don't want to deal with that.
You hear a lot of people say like, "Oh, why didn't you take a picture of it?" And it's like, who in their right mind would?
You don't even think like that.
You don't. Like, you would think it's either get away or like, this is it. Like, you don't think that, "Oh, I'm going to take a picture of it because I might get famous from this."
Well, also, you know this, and I know this from doing security. When we've had violent people and we've dealt with it, they are bad people that have come onto our property, you're dealing with them, and you know you probably should take a picture so the police have a description of this person.
You're just entirely in this situation.
You're in that situation, and I'm not going, can I take a picture? Because then they're going to get agitated because you're taking the picture. And if you try to pull out your phone, they could misinterpret it, and there's all kinds of things that could happen. Now, that's with humans. But I don't look at cryptids or spirits or any of this other stuff any different than if you're trying to take their image or whatever, and you're wasting time from getting away, first of all. Okay.
You could be agitating it, because
you could be agitating it.
Some of these creatures do know what a gun is, so they do misinterpret what you're actually doing. And so what might be a peaceful situation where you can go away from each other might turn into an aggressive one because it sees you pull something out.
Yeah, and I've thought about that situation, and I thought, man, I am not about to try to sit there and take no picture just so I can prove something to somebody.
And with my luck, that the one time I try to take a picture is the one time my flash is going to be on.
Well, that's what the guy in that potluck that we did a while back.
Yeah, I remember. That's why I brought it up.
He had his phone there, and he thought about lifting it up and taking a picture, but he thought, what if the flash goes, you know, all these things are going through his mind. The light could attract it because, you know, the windows were kind of fogged up and they couldn't really see in real good or whatever.
He was pretty sure that they didn't know he was there. So, like, there was no reason to try to do anything to attract their attention. And I feel like that should be a go-to.
Universal.
If you see a cryptid of any sort, if it hasn't noticed you, don't try to get proof. Get away.
Try to get its attention. Hey, do you see me here? Hey, guy, I want to tell you about your car's extended warranty.
I don't like that pose you're doing. Can you maybe put your hand on your hip and look backwards?
You're looking very hostile, my friend. You're looking very aggressive. Well, folks, we've come to the end of the journey here, and I still got a couple stories left, but I'm going to tell those on the live stream. So, folks, if you don't listen to the live stream, you got to start. And like I said, you got to start checking it out. We do all kinds of, and if you want your comment read and highlighted, you can make a small donation or whatever. Donations are not expected, okay, but they are appreciated because it does help the show continue to go. And it does a lot toward, because we put the money all back into the show for the giveaways and everything else. Just trying to grow the show, And then, funny, the other day I got a comment from somebody who said, all Josh Turner wants to do is try to get more listeners and grow his show. And I'm like, yeah, duh. No, duh. That's exactly what you're doing, because you want more people to listen to the show. I mean, that's the whole point. I'm going to sit up here and talk, and gather stories just to talk to myself.
Yeah, it's a hobby we do, that we enjoy doing, but it's also
a business now. We have to file taxes on it and everything else. It's like a normal thing, But I'm not doing this as my main source of income by any means. But we do have to have a source of income to keep the show going. Otherwise, we can't justify doing it. So, yeah, it's a job that I enjoy doing. But I just think it's funny how people's minds work. They're like, it's like if you hire somebody and you give them $16 an hour and they find out you're making $1 off of them or something, and they're like, you're making money off of me, which I don't want to say his name, but
I knew exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, he was mad because I was making $1, and I'm like, that's how it works. I mean, like, I wouldn't be employing you
the opportunity, and I'm doing most of the stuff that like insurance and all this other stuff. So I'm also letting you know where to go, so you don't have to go find that out yourself. Because yeah, I guess I technically could just go up to a place and be like, hey, I'm a security guard. You need security? But that's not how it works.
It was like, he got offended. Of course, he wasn't from here. And I just think maybe, I don't know, maybe that's something to do with it. But he got offended that we were making $1 per hour off of him. And I said, that's nothing. Yeah. That is such a small profit margin. It's not even worth the hassle. And I was only working that. I don't want to get into why I was even letting him work, because of a friend of mine, because of your stepdad. Yeah. And I was just like, man, I told him, I said, I can't deal with this guy, man. This guy's stupid beyond stupid. He doesn't realize how it works. If I go to work for somebody, they got me doing a job, they're making some sort of profit off of that, or they wouldn't be employing me, But people don't think like that. And so this guy that said, oh, he's just trying to get more listeners and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to be doing. If anybody out there that's listening to the show can tell me what my true purpose is, if I'm here to, somehow change the face of the future of our world or something with my show, then let me know so I can start heading in that direction. Until then, yeah, that's what we're doing. And we want more people to listen, so we can have,
we want our community to grow.
To grow.
I mean, I think we have a great community. My bad. I think we have a fantastic cult starting out so far, and I'd like to grow it. Yeah.
So, anyways, that's what's going on, folks, and so we appreciate you tuning in, and that's all That's all we have for tonight. And thank you for being joining us, and
thank you for not joining us.
Thank you for joining us for the not deer. So you can go back and listen and not be enjoying yourself in no time. So anyway, thank you guys. We appreciate it, and be sure and tune in next week and the week after and the week after that and the week after that and every Friday going on.
And Tuesday, hopefully.
Yep, going on into the future. We appreciate it, man. All right.
Good night.
Good night.